Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl Podcast, a 3-time award-winning show that aims to motivate and inspire you while increasing the amount of female role models in the media, especially in relation to adventure and physical challenges. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. If you're passionate about adventure, challenge and learning from women who have overcome obstacles and achieved remarkable things, then this is the podcast for you. Every Tuesday at 7 a.m, new episodes go live featuring incredible women who share their stories, insights and tips to help you achieve your dreams and goals. You can support the Tough Girl mission by signing up as a patron. Visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. Keep listening until the very end as I share more information about what's going on with me with Tough Girl Challenges, give shout outs and recommend other Tough Girl Podcast episodes. More information can be found at toughgirlchallenges.com.
My name is Caroline Paul, and I am a writer who has published my 7th book recently, and it's called Tough Broad, From Boogie Boarding to Wing Walking, How Outdoor Adventure Improves Our Lives as We Age. And I live in San Francisco, California.
Have you always sort of lived in San Francisco?
Most of my life. I went to college near here, and I just moved to the nearest big city with a lot of my friends, and most of us stayed. Yeah, so 40 years. Mm-hmm.
Oh, amazing. I mean, I'm so excited to chat to you about your book, Tough Broad. But I always find it interesting to see like where you came from. What were you like growing up? Were you adventurous? Were you running around in the outdoors? What were your early years like?
I have an identical twin sister and a younger brother. We grew up in first New York City, but mostly we consider ourselves country. We grew up in the country, a rural area of Connecticut, and called Cornwall, Connecticut. And we had the kind of upbringing that most kids had in the 60s and 70s, which was pretty feral. My mom and dad just kind of said, go on your bike all day and come back when it's dark. And there was really no sense of this helicopter parenting that people do. We really had to amuse ourselves. And most of the time that was outside. Actually, I remember really valuing this idea of adventure pretty early on. And even though my parents were not outdoors people, they were people who wanted us to be well-rounded. And so, of course, they wanted us to do things like learn one instrument, learn one language, learn how to ride a bike, swim, and sled, for instance. And because they wanted us to be well-rounded, not because I don't think there was a concept of when you go outside and learn about risk assessment that you become a better person. It was none of that. It was like, please get out of the house and amuse yourselves till dinner. And also be well-rounded so that when you grow up, you can figure out what you like to do.
Did you have dreams and ambitions of what your life would look like? Did you ever think that you would have a career that you've had?
I knew from an early age that I wanted to have adventures, whatever that meant in my tiny brain. Here in the United States, we got a subscription to a magazine called National Geographic. And it was one of those things that families got. We were very privileged. We grew up having enough of everything. And so I'm sure they were pretty expensive, but they were also very coveted. And we would keep our National Geographics and they would be lined up on the bookshelf like any book. Any, nice hardcover book. And I would read those National Geographics and I didn't see any women adventurers in them, but I saw a lot of male adventurers and they were just doing things like, rowing tiny boats across the Pacific to set some world record or climbing Everest or whatever it was, flying balloons. And I wanted a life like that. And I decided that the way to get paid for that as an adult was to become a journalist of some sort. So that was a little bit my idea when I went away to college. I went to Stanford University and I studied communication with the idea of being actually a documentary filmmaker. But my life took a big swerve because I became a firefighter, which actually was the good antidote to this because I got paid to have adventures.
So that would have been what, in the 80s?
Yeah, I was 26. It was 1989. I was the 15th woman to become a San Francisco firefighter out of 1,500 men. So there weren't that many of us. But it was an amazing job. I really learned a lot about myself. I was somebody who was very fit, and I was really interested in this idea of bravery. And to be a firefighter, you're always testing your bravery. I mean, we had a lot of big fires in the city made of wood Victorian houses and steep hills.
You actually did a TED talk, around bravery to raise brave girls and to encourage adventure, which I just think is amazing. And I mean, you don't need to regurgitate the whole sort of thing, but what was almost like the synopsis? Because I know a lot of women and men who listen to this podcast, have girls and they want to raise them to be brave and adventurous and to get out there. And even, I have some conversations with my friends, and it still happens now whenever we sort of mention, oh, we're off to go hiking to New Zealand, or we're off to go on this adventure or this bike packing trip, or, whatever it may be. And people still say, oh, aren't you brave? Oh, I could never do anything like that. And it's almost like it's this continually digging at women to make them aware of their vulnerability and the fact that they've got to be responsible for their own safety. But I definitely I don't have any children, but I have a niece and nephews, and I would love to, obviously I'm not raising her, but I want to encourage her to be brave and adventurous. What words would you say for parents out there?
Well, I began to realize as I looked around that a lot of women simply led with fear. Like every situation was sort of framed in how scary it was. And men did not do that. Men usually led with bravery. And so I certainly saw that when I was in the firehouse, that bravery was the watchword. It was the paradigm in which everybody worked. And what I began to realize is when you lead with bravery, your life is really quite open and there's a lot of possibility. But when you lead with fear, a lot of it is about saying no and shutting things down. Now, so I was interested in why women in general lead with fear. And I began to notice that we actually encourage fear in our girls. And the reason we do that is not because we want them to be, shrinking violets. It's because we think it'll protect them. We think that if they're fearful of the dark alley or fearful of that stranger, then they won't get into trouble. They'll be safe. But in fact, what I really began to realize is that risk assessment, hazard assessment, pushing boundaries, learning about your own decision-making process, learning about what works for you or not is a confidence builder and allows you to make better decisions. And so I began to realize that this subtle, very subtle concept of teaching your girls to be afraid is actually really harmful. And of course, as adult women, we do definitely realize that there's all these books about shedding your fear and leaning in. But it's hard to do by the time you're an adult because you've been steeped in this paradigm of assess things through a lens of fear. And again, men assess things through a lens of bravery. Now, there is toxic bravery for sure, where you're just like, barreling through doing reckless things. And that's not what I'm talking about. So I looked into a lot of studies and, turns out we definitely do raise our girls and boys differently. And a lot of times if you're a parent, notice how often you caution your girls against doing something and how often you encourage your boys to do that same thing. And I talk about some studies in the TED Talk. The TED Talk is actually really worth listening to if you are a parent, just because I think it'll spark an understanding of it's all very subtle. It's not like you're consciously doing this. I really believe in the concept of bravery, not just because you get to run into big fires, but because it really allows you to be prepared for all the things in life that are emotionally scary, that are mentally scary. You just learn a lot about yourself. And here's the thing about fear is when you're afraid, you often look to other people for decision making. You don't trust your own assessment. And that's actually a more dangerous position to be in.
I mean, it's really interesting sort of talking about, like you've mentioned, raising brave girls. And on the flip side of that, almost going, so, I'm 42 now. And I'm really randomly, I don't know why it's suddenly happening now. I don't know if it happens at two women at some point, where I'm definitely starting to notice like, ooh, I'm getting older. Like in 18 years, I'm going to be 60. And a lot of my friends are going through like perimenopause and menopause and celebrating the big 50 and, their 50th. My parents are in their 70s now. And I think this would be right. It's really interesting, to talk more about your book, Tough Broad, because this is about adventurous women who are at a different stage in their life from being young girls. And I'd love to know just a little bit more about, where this idea came from, how long had you been thinking about it? And by the way, I'm so glad you put it down on paper, but talk us through sort of, that development and the importance of sharing the stories that you've shared in the book.
Well, I wrote this book called The Gutsy Girl, which is for like 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old girls. And it's encouraging adventure for them because I believe it's a great proving ground. It's a great learning classroom for kids. And it became a New York Times bestseller. So I have to say that everybody was like, write one for women, write one for men. And I was like, no, women don't need this. They don't need my advice. I'm a very unique, particular person, and I don't have universal advice for the many different kinds of women in their 30s and 40s. I just didn't. I don't have kids either. I'm white and privileged, and I'm American. I mean, there's all these, I'm queer. There's all these like things that put me in a narrower box. And I didn't think I had anything to say. But when I was 55, so I'm 60 now, when I was 55, I remember very clearly being on my surfboard in winter swell. And I'm not a good surfer. It was kind of stormy, and there were all these men out there my age and older, but there were no women. And it was interesting because I knew there were a lot of women who were better than me. And the conditions were, kind of daunting because it was stormy, but it was still surfable. I started to wonder, like, where are they? And same thing happened when I was riding my electric skateboard. And I also fly experimental aircraft. And again, so many men my age and older. And I began to wonder, why aren't there women out there? Is there something they know that I don't? As I approach 60, that I have to change my life? And I had lived, a life of adventure and really felt that I was my best self in the outdoors. And when I embraced adventure, and I began to wonder, what is the messaging that we're getting that is telling women not to be outside, that is different from the men who are aging are getting? Because clearly they're out there. They're charging out there. And what I began to see, because my own friends were very disheartened about their aging process, and I began to really drill down on the messaging, which is pretty clear to most of us who are women. Because I've had men say, kind of be puzzled by it, but it's like, because they're not women, we feel it all around, this sort of subtle instruction that we are supposed to be guarding our increasingly frail bones, that we're on a sort of cognitive decline. We're definitely culturally irrelevant. I mean, a lot of my friends talked about feeling invisible. That word is used a lot by women certainly over 50, probably over 40. And a lot of the currency that we have been valued for, our looks and our reproductive value, they're changing. And we are sort of dropped into this gray area where we aren't given an identity. Men still get Indiana Jones running through the tombs at 75. Or they get, as I say in the book, James Bond villains in their 50s, 60s, 70s trying to blow up the world. Like, I don't want people to blow up the world, but there's a charisma to that. There's a sort of, there's a power to that. And we aren't given those messages. So I began to realize how toxic this messaging was. What it was doing was instructing women to sort of narrow their lives and not embrace things and think of aging as a time of like caution and fear, I guess, again. I began to wonder where outdoor adventure fit into this. So I did a lot of research on fulfilling aging. So this book does cover many adventures, and I interview a lot of women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 90s, 80s and 90s. But really what it is, it's about fulfilling aging. So I did a lot of research on this, and I came upon some research that really turned my head around. And that if you leave with nothing else, you should remember this, which is that the way we look at our own aging predicts how well we age. So what that means is if you have a negative view of your aging, you think that aging is a time of frailty and diminution and illness, you actually have a much higher chance of a cardiac arrest earlier, cognitive decline and earlier. And the opposite is true. So if you have a positive view of your own aging, you think of it as a time of, exhilaration and exploration. You are happier, healthier, and you live 7.5 years longer, which is pretty huge. So then I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I never heard of this. And here women are being bombarded by these messages, which are clearly now really bad for our health, not just our mental health, but our physical health. And I thought, well, that's really great to know. And I appreciate that the scientists found this for us, but how do we get that positive mindset in the face of such subliminal messaging? And I had a feeling the answer lay in outdoor adventure.
Tell me about your relationship with your mum, because she does get featured in the book, and like sort of her aging and what happened to her at different ages. I know she took us sort of skydiving at 52 and cycling at 62. And how was that, seeing your mum take on these new challenges?
Well, what was really interesting is as my friends were bemoaning their aging journey, I was actually really psyched about it. I was really interested in who I was going to be as I got older. It's not like I didn't understand this messaging, and it's not like I didn't feel it, but it turns out I had a positive role model in my own mother that was telling me that my aging was going to be great, which because my mom blossomed after she hit 40. She went back to school. She started a career. She divorced my lovely father, but that was a good thing. And she found a wonderful boyfriend and she just had this whole new life at 40. And while I was a kid, I was like, what the heck's going on? But later, as I got older, I really appreciated this. And then it kept happening, 50. And then at 60, she picked up bicycling, and her whole outlook on what she could and could not do changed. And she became this really adventurous, in my mind, person whose life was really fun. They went on all these great adventures. And so I saw that my own future was going to be positive. That was my subliminal messaging overall. My mom actually is British. Yay. So I'm half English. And she grew up thinking that the outdoor life was not for her. She was never an outdoors person. She was not an adventurer. Her own mother cautioned her about everything and also told her that, being outside was unladylike. And so she didn't have an outdoor life of any sort, but she had this one inflection point that I think set her on a path for her biking adventures later, which were incredibly life-changing for her. And that is that she decided to go skydiving when she was 52. She considered herself not a brave person. And when she decided to do this, she was a little bit at an inflection point. She was having a little trouble. I think she and her boyfriend had broken up for a little while, and she was visiting my twin sister, and she decided to go skydiving. And I have to say that it's only 2 minutes in the air, but I have to say it changed her own understanding of herself. Just that one outdoor adventure made her realize, oh, maybe it's not that I'm a brave person, but I've done a brave thing. And that opened up and kind of blew out what she thought she could and could not do. And I use her in the book because she, again, is another example of how simply going outside takes on as a direct rebuke all the messaging we get about what we can and cannot do.
How was it for you turning 60? Like, do you do anything special to mark, the bigger birthdays, the ones that end in a zero?
No, I don't do anything special, but I love turning 60. And one of the reasons, Sarah, is that I was 57 when I did the bulk of these interviews. And to a person, when I asked them, the women I interviewed who were older than me told me that the 60s were their favorite decade. So I was psyched to turn 60. I had gotten proof from all these women, or at least empirical testimonies about how great the 60s were going to be. And I'm psyched. It's all true. Well, here's the thing. Menopause is an interesting time because our endocrine system has changed a lot. And there's a lot more research on this now. So all those extreme caregiving hormones, and I don't have all the scientific names, so people out there who are more learned than me will know what I'm talking about specifically. But in general, our caregiving hormones are titrated differently or back a little. And it's not like we don't have empathy, because we still do, but those extreme sort of chemicals that urge us to look outward and take care of the outward stuff has changed. And now we turn more to taking care of ourselves. And there's a real power to that. And so postmenopausal women are really taking care of themselves now. And it's really kind of a great time for us, as opposed to what the messages say, which is, your life is over pretty much.
I love what you shared about the reduction and maybe caregiving, but then also taking care of themselves and prioritizing themselves, which is actually so, so important. And so many women don't do. It's this like the sacrifice that they do is actually they've got to, take care of themselves first of all. So, you're so lucky to have all these incredible women to speak to. How did you find these women? Were they just in your circle? How did
No, I actually didn't. I know some. I mean, I think there aren't enough women in the outdoors, but they certainly are out there. But I know a lot of them. I grew up with them. I was a whitewater rafter for some years, and all my friends who are whitewater rafters are big outdoors people still. I have a circle of adventurous women, but there really aren't that many like there are with men. So I didn't want to actually interview any of my friends. I did in the end interview one of my friends and my own mom, but otherwise I wanted to reach out. I wanted a variety of people, of races, of financial backgrounds, and of outdoor knowledge, because I wanted to make it clear that the outdoors is for everybody and that your adventure is yours alone, that it's not about that getting outside and just simply going on a walk can be an adventure. I mean, I went bird watching, which I have to say, I did not think was going to be an adventure. I looked a little bit down on my nose because, I fly. I was a paraglider, I bike pack through countries, and I sea kayak in strange oceans. Was bird watching really going to be an adventure? But I wanted to include it because I was like, you know what? It's a really great way for women to get outside, because I already was very convinced of the medicinal aspects of nature. So just getting outside is really good for us on a biological level. And there's a lot of science behind this. And if I could just touch on that briefly, which is that things as simple as birdsong, for instance, is calming for our brain, because on a primal level, it tells us that there's no predators about. It actually lowers all our stress hormones. There's ample science that the chemicals from trees is also an immune booster. There's things like the soft lines of nature and the fractal elements match really well with our retinal structure. And so in terms of processing when we're outside, our brain doesn't have to filter out a lot of the noise and harshness that comes with being in an urban setting. And when you rest your brain, that's really good for it. So people who have gone outside on a walk in nature come back and they test markedly higher on cognitive and memory tests. So on all these levels, being outside is important. So I wanted to get people outside, and bird watching seemed great. So I interviewed a woman named Virginia Rose, and she's been in a wheelchair since she was 14. And I wanted to show that, we can adapt to our physical limitations as we age. You don't just say, no, I can never go outside again. There's things you can do. And Virginia Rose was a great example. As she said, we are all temporarily able-bodied. Everybody's going to be where she is at some point, if you're lucky. And she had an organization called Bird Ability, where she brings people out bird watching. If they have a disability, she makes it accessible for them. So I went bird watching and had never done it before, and realized that it was such an adventure. It had all the rhythms of an adventure. It had the quest. We were looking for birds. It had the anticipation of like, I hear the bird. Where is it? And then the exhilaration when you see the bird. There was the physical vitality of an adventure, because she wheeled and I walked 6 miles. Turned out we were on a bird-a-thon. There's many types of birding sort of templates, and this was bird-a-thon. And we actually logged 52 species for citizen science. It was pretty great. We're there during the spring migration. And I realized that I had to really change my idea of what an adventure was. An adventure is basically anything that taps your exploratory nature, that pushes your boundary just a little, that gives you some sort of novelty, and that offers some physical vitality. And bird watching is certainly included. Of course, I also went scuba diving with an 80-year-old. I learned how to BMX bike race with a 74-year-old. So there's lots of different adventures that can meet what I consider the hallmarks of fulfilling aging, which is basically, this is the cool thing about outdoor adventure. As I did more research, I realized when you go outside, you're hitting all the really important things we need to hold on to as we age and which tend to fall away, which is community, purpose, novelty, health, obviously, and that final thing that I kind of added to this, which is a positive mindset about your own aging.
I love those things. And do you know, it's things that even like that resonates with me now. Health, obviously, totally get that. Positive mindset. I think, people who listen to, to these types of podcasts, who are reading books like yours, they're filling their mind with that positivity and learning new, having a purpose. I definitely know what my purpose is. Community. I have something called the Tough Girl Tribe, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. It's online, and I think I wish I had more people around me, but I've still got like a couple of friends who live relatively close to me. One of the areas that I've maybe sort of noticed with regards to aging, and might just be me, is that I've definitely started to become maybe more selfish, more set in my ways. And I also notice it with my parents as well. And I suppose I want to link that into sort of comfort zones, and that you can get to a point where you stop doing new things. And, one of the pillars you said is like that novelty, where you're just like, oh, well, you don't want to become a beginner. You don't want to try new things. It almost becomes harder and harder and harder to go further afield, to test yourself. How do you keep pushing on your comfort zone? How do you manage to keep saying yes to trying new things and to going on new adventures? Are there any like tips or tricks or anything that you do in that regard?
Well, I mean, one of the beauties of being older is that you do know what you like, or at least you think you do, and you have a lot of experience. So being set in our ways, I get it. We've already sort of done that trial and error. We're like, hey, I like where I am. But I did a lot of research on the brain, because the brain is something that we're concerned about as we age. So things like memory and keeping, cognitively sharp. And it turns out that novelty is a really important way to keep your brain firing, and that, brain plasticity is real. There is a cultural sense that you can't learn anything new. Old dogs can't learn new tricks. It's just biologically not true. And I think we also know that, but society wise, we're told we're set in our ways, especially for women. I mean, this idea that we feel invisible is real, but remember that invisibility is also a superpower. Mm-hmm. So when you're invisible, you can do whatever you want because nobody sees you. So you're not embarrassing yourself. And there was something about aging that I actually interviewed people that were learning new things. And one of the women I interviewed was named Vijaya Srivastava, and she learned to swim at 68. And I asked her, what was it about being older that helped you sort of learn? Was it a hindrance to learn? Because swimming is actually quite a scary thing to learn. It sort of triggers all our psychological fears about drowning and death. And it's a pretty big feat. And she said actually aging helped her learn, because she, first of all, didn't care how she looked in her bathing suit. She was like, all these bulges, who cares? And secondly, there was a little bit of an urgency to it. She knew that if she didn't learn now, she never would. So there wasn't a sense like, I have more time later, I'll learn at another point. And the reason she learned, by the way, is because her doctor told her that she needed to exercise. She had zero outdoor experience, zero. She didn't even walk. She said when she grew up in India, badminton, she had played like a couple times, but otherwise, even since moving to the United States, she had been here many years. She just did not embrace any outdoor situation at all. And then her doctor said, you need to lose some weight. What about learning to swim? Because I know you have a pool in your condominium complex. And so she enlisted a friend, but she had a big fear of drowning. Like, of course, we all would. She enlisted a friend and they learned. And this is the amazing thing, which is why novelty is so important, is that once she learned to swim, first of all, she loves it. When I met her, she had been swimming for about 4 years, but she swam with this kind of joy that was amazing. And she swam longer than I did. I got out of the pool. And she told me that it had opened up her life to other things, because she realized, if I can learn to swim at 68, what else can I do? And so it really blasted open her expectations of herself and upended all the messaging that said, this is who she was. She had already, you're at this age and you are this. And just that small learning to swim, which she'd only done to get, her glucose numbers set and her to lose a little weight, had done way more than that. It upended who she thought she could be and what the possibilities were. And she started yoga. She started walking in the hills around her home in Berkeley. And she said people could tell she was more confident. She had better posture. She looked great. She had this incredible sense of fun, which I think she'd always had, but now she applied it to these amazing adventures. So that small step of learning something new, she didn't just learn that. She learned a lot about herself.
I just want so many women to get this message, especially the women who are thinking, well, it's too late now. I'm too old for that. And it's like, no.
It's a perfect time. This is the thing. And I keep saying it. And I say it in the book too. It's a perfect time until it's not. There will be a time when you cannot. And I don't have a Pollyanna view of aging overall. I do think that women stop themselves way too early. And now you're really missing this golden time. It really is an amazing time. But then, of course, my own mother got Parkinson's at 80 and bicycling. She had bicycled since she was 62 and she had to give up bicycling because she no longer had the balance. She could have actually, by the way, adapted, and a lot of people do. But I think at the time she didn't know she had Parkinson's. So there was all these other sort of mental stressors. But basically, there is a time when you have to give up your outdoor activity. And she mourned that. But it had changed her. It offered her this life of adventure and community. She'd never been that social. But she told me, and maybe this is a very sort of British person of a certain age. She said, she doesn't really like chit chat. But bicycling was perfect because you did it in community. But if you didn't like somebody, you just biked away. And also there was this sort of, you didn't have to be socially skillful to have fun biking. You just had to understand the basic etiquette of like, don't go too fast, don't go too slow, help somebody when you have a flat and, stop for lunch. That was a kind of the perfect medium within which she could bond. I did a lot of research on community as well. And it's very, very hard to hold on to communities as we age. But there is a lot of research that say, happy people hang out with other people. And there's a concept called, it's not just being social. It's not just, having people around you. It's something called a sense of belonging. And what scientists call it, they say that, belonging is what really fulfills us as humans, as the social animals we are. And what you really want is some sort of cultural apparatus. So people, for instance, who are very serious about their religion and belong to a church or a mosque or a synagogue, they often are happier than those of us who don't. And this is no knock against God, but a lot of that reason is probably because they have this cultural apparatus of their religion that bonds them to other people. And my mom's cultural apparatus was bicycling, and it was real. It's not just like a hobby. It offered all those pillars of fulfilling aging at once and seamlessly. Like, it's fun. You're not going out there going, and now I have to have purpose and novelty. You're not. You're going on a bike ride.
How's your mum doing now?
She's amazing and she still walks, but, things are definitely harder, and she laments the aging process. And as I say in the book, she, at the end of my book, is a chapter on my mom, and we go on a walk, and the walk is markedly different from what it was even 6 months ago. And she tells me what I would give to be 60 again. What was so moving about that statement is that she didn't want to be 20 or 30 or 40. Those times when we're told are the gilded times. She wanted to be 60. That's why I wrote the book, is because this is an amazing time. And at some point you won't be able to do anything, but it's not now. Even if you're 70, 80, people age very differently. And by the way, I want to keep urging that the adventure that you pick is yours. If it's just walking outside. One of the bird watchers I was with was in a wheelchair, and he had been in a wheelchair since he was 18. He had extreme multiple sclerosis, and he just was housebound until he got interested in birds. And what he did was he started to watch birds out of his kitchen window, but then they brought him outside on his porch. And then he put feeders up and went out in his backyard. And I met him on that 6-mile birdathon, because as he told me, birds brought me back to humans. He got out in the world because he was interested in birds, and it was tiny, tiny steps. He didn't just suddenly go on a big bird watching excursion. He did it the way he had to do it, which was in small steps. And that's what I urge people. Just understand, we take pharmaceuticals that our doctors prescribe without question, even though there's a long list of side effects about how terrible they could be for you, but they're going to handle this, one thing. So we take them without question. And what I urge people to understand is that the outdoors is the best medicine. It really is. And the side effects might be a little discomfort, some fear, but they are not vomiting, diarrhea, possible kidney failure, dizziness, whatever it is that the pharmaceuticals. It's very interesting to me that when I say it's so important to get outside and have a tiny adventure, that women immediately say, well, it's really scary. And I'm like, yeah, it probably is. But titrate that fear to what works for you. And it's just a side effect of an incredible medicine. So pop that pill every day and do it on your own terms. So that's why I interview somebody who walks, or actually she hiked, but I begged her to walk because she was 93 and was going to just cream me on the steep hills. So we went on a walk, and, being outside is an incredible elixir. I had this particular view of adventure, and I really pegged it to high adrenaline and pushing our comfort zones. And what I realized in the writing of this book, that an element of getting outside that is really important is this feeling of awe, AWE, awe. And awe is that feeling that you get in the presence of something bigger than you. It's like fear and wonder and dread. And it turns out that awe is really good for us, and that it's really easily accessed in the outdoors. So when you feel awe, people self-report much lower anxiety, much lower depression, and their inflammation markers. So inflammation is a sign of ill health, go way down. And so accessing your own awe, this sort of wonder at the world, makes you feel more interconnected, and it makes your well-being just skyrocket. And so that's one of the big reasons I urge people to get outside as well, because it's not just physical vitality that you're getting. So you can go to the gym for a lot of physical health, or for your heart rate. But when you go outside, your well-being increases, and awe is one of the reasons. And so here's the thing that really was interesting to me. So awe is this kind of looking outward and feeling a little bit small, which is what happens when you look at the night sky, or you look at the Grand Canyon here in the United States, or you look at a cool flower or a tiny insect. Awe, that's what you feel. It turns out we live in a world of anti-awe devices, like our phone, which narrows our vision and makes us feel powerful and in control, which is definitely not what awe makes us feel. So it's possible to cultivate awe. And what I realized in the writing of this book is that all these women that I interacted with, they knew what awe was. If they didn't know it they may not have been able to articulate it. But when I went bird watching, the awe that people felt when they saw a bird they'd probably seen like a million times was so inspiring. And the same when I walked with Dot, who was 93, she stopped to look at every leaf. She stopped to tell me about the heron's nest over there. I mean, it was an awe walk. So when you go outside and you allow yourself to feel the wonder that the outdoors can really trigger easily. I mean, you can feel awe with poetry, music. There's many ways to feel awe. I'm not trying to say, but going outside is an easy way to access awe. And it's, again, so good for you. And I didn't even know this concept of awe until I was writing this book. And it turns out that one of the reasons, when I really look closely at the things I do, one of the reasons it's so important to me to stay outside and do, yes, what looks like high adrenaline stuff is actually the awe that I feel.
What you're talking about, I experienced in New Zealand on one of these incredible passes called Waiu Pass, and just walking down, I would constantly just have to stop and just look around at like these mountains and these massive like blue skies, but it was like mountains on mountains on mountains, covered in snow, and you're just looking down into this phenomenal valley with these blue lakes at the bottom, and you're just like, this is to be honest, awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Just and such a magical moment. I do joke. I was telling some people at some points, like when I was in these mountains, like I'd stop and try and take like mental pictures as well as the actual pictures, with my mobile phone. And at some points I'd look around and I'd be start to feel emotional. And I'd be like, God, am I like welling up? And then I'm like, oh no, it's probably me. I just probably just start my period or something. But I did feel these like big emotions out there.
When I fly, so I fly a gyrocopter, which I learned to fly for the book. But when I fly over this specific beach, I do cry. That's what awe does. It taps those deep emotions. And I'm so grateful for the world. And that's the other thing. Oh, the science says that people who feel awe tend to be more grateful, have more gratitude, which is super important as well. And so, yeah. So you, of course, go on these epic, amazing walks, but I want to emphasize that you can find awe right outside your back door as long as you have to access it in yourself. And I talk about studies in the book about people who access awe and what it does for their physical and emotional health. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing that we can go out on the Camino and see these amazing mountains, but also go out your backyard, or you're just back step, or you're just a nearby tree if you don't have a yard.
I don't know if it happened in America or if you could see it from where you're based, but in definitely sort of, I think in the UK, possibly parts of Europe as well, over the past, or yesterday evening or the evening before, is the Northern Lights had come down so low.
Did you see them?
I didn't see them.
I went out last night to see them. A friend and I went to a park. Oh yeah, I love the sky. Go out if there's a meteor shower, a comet, anything, an eclipse, I'll go out. And so I tried to see it last night. And the truth is I didn't see it, but the process of going and like hoping for it was an adventure in itself.
And Carol, I'd love to know, what are some of your plans and goals that you've got for your 60th decade? How are you going to make this the best decade ever?
I am hopefully going to just embrace the concept I talk about, which is, community, purpose, novelty, physical vitality, and hold on to this positive view of my own aging. I had a goal to fly my gyrocopter to Sedona, Arizona, which took me 4 days, and I just got back and I flew over the Grand Canyon, and I took some video. I'm not really a big videoer, but I guess it's good for the book. So I did post a little bit, but when I went over the Grand Canyon, I thought, you know what? I'm not going to take any video. I want to be present for this. I want to see it myself. So I had the most amazing 4-day gyrocopter cross country trip. The United States is vast. It's different from England in that there's a lot of wild country, a lot. And you see it when you're flying low in a little gyrocopter from the air. It's a little open cockpit, tiny little plane. And, so I hope to do more of that. And I'm really into mini adventures now. I used to go all around the world for adventures, but now I can just step out my back door and be on a paddleboard in the bay right here near the city. And that's enough for me.
Caroline, you are on social media. Do you want to share where you're most active and how people can connect with you to find out more about you, your incredible books, and they can buy, Tough Broad, Gutsy Girl, and all the other books that you've written? Where are you most active?
Well, I'm most active on Instagram, but that's sort of relative. I'm active-ish, but I'm not that great at it. But yeah, go to Caroline MB Paul on Instagram, and I have a website, carolinepaul.com.
Perfect. I will make sure I put all of the links to your social media in the show notes so that people can connect with you. But I mean, I feel like you've already dropped so many words of wisdom and so many top tips and just incredible pieces of advice for women. But I do want to give you the opportunity to share your final words, final thoughts. But is there anything that you would like to say to women, especially listening?
I guess I just want to re-emphasize that your adventure is yours. And I found that the people who were most successful, especially if they a lot of the women I interviewed had no background in adventures. They did it with other people. They asked a friend, and that really allowed them to start that journey. And that it's yours. So if it's tiny steps are great to get outside. If you have been outside, stay outside, because this is an amazing time for us until it's not. Oops, that's a really negative thing to land on. Until it's not.
Until it's not.
Everybody knows what I mean. It's a great time. Please get in touch with me and tell me your adventures. I've had emails from people who are paragliders at like 75. It's kind of amazing. Or who just, started walking, and the transformative power of that. Yeah, just get outside. Nature is amazing and we need to protect it. This is actually, by the way, a secret climate change book, because we need to protect what is good for us. And so without nature, we will suffer. And it's clear that nature is so important. So please, we have to protect it.
Caroline, thank you so much for coming on Tough Girl podcast. Just honestly incredible to speak to you. I really appreciate you giving up your time, and just best of luck with, I was going to say best of luck with aging. I was like, best of luck.
Yeah, I love it. Best of luck with aging. High five.
But honestly, just amazing to speak to you, and just, best of luck with all your future adventures and challenges.
I love it. No, and with aging. The biggest adventure of all, aging.
Hey Tribe, I really hope you enjoyed the episode with Caroline Paul. I just think it's such a fascinating discussion, how outdoor adventure improves our lives as we age. And it's definitely something that I've been thinking about. Because I've been doing the Tough Girl podcast now for 9 years, but also I'm getting older. I'm now 42, going to be turning 43. Soon 7 years, I'll be hitting 50. Another 10 years after that, 60. Hopefully the Tough Girl podcast will still be going on, with new episodes going out live every Tuesday at 7 a.m. at UK time, with bonus episodes going live on a Thursday. But it's definitely something which comes across in my mind. It's something I do think about more and more and more. And that's why I think it's so important getting older women's stories out there, especially women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And I just love this concept, how outdoor adventure improves our lives as we age. And if you want to learn more about me, want to learn more about Tough Girl Challenges, what I've been up to this year, then I am also releasing a solo Tough Girl podcast episodes. I do these sort of maybe once every 6 months, or after big challenges. So after I finished the Tiara Roa Trail in New Zealand, I did a reflection episode. It's actually 2 hours long. It's a real epic, sort of talking through the North Island of New Zealand and the South Island of New Zealand. But I do these reflections episodes sort of once a year, because I think it's fascinating. I don't normally look back, but every once in a while I like to look back and reflect on progress, because sometimes when you're living in it, you don't necessarily know or remember like what you've achieved and what you've done and how far you have progressed. And I can actually go back to when I first started the podcast and listen to these reflections episodes, which I think is really, really cool. I actually don't think I did any in 2015. I think I started the reflections episode in 2017, but it's something I actually did when I was out in New Zealand. I went back and listened to all of my solo episodes, and it's quite fascinating, the journey that I've been on and the lessons that I've been learned. But on the 1st of August, there has been another episode released, a solo reflections episode, where I look back at the start of 2024, and I also talk through my future plans for this year and what I hope to achieve. So please do go and check out that episode. Thank you again for listening. Thank you again for all of your support. Thank you for telling your friends about the Tough Girl podcast. And if you are able to, and you would like to financially support the work that I do and help me with the mission to increase the amount of female role models in the media, especially in relation to adventure and physical challenges, then please do go and check out Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. All that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it, believe in yourself, because I believe in you. Take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.